Hello and welcome back to the port. I'm the Gaff Major, and this is the French destroyer tech tree summary. As an introduction, this is a review of the French tech tree destroyers, and I'm mostly going to be focusing on covering tier 4 to tier 7. Uh, all the stuff that I'm going to be talking about is going to be a very broad brush approach. So it's not going to cover every little niggly bit here and there. Your experiences may differ. This is quite a lot of my own opinion slash what I can take out of the information available. Now it is broken down into a number of categories. So we go through traits. That's where we cover off almost like the general traits of the actual destroyers themselves. This covers off general traits in regards to survivability, artillery, torpedoes, maneuverability, uh, concealment, and consumables. Now there's also going to be a category covering of the commanders. This is just going to be a quick brief cover of what do these commanders offer and what don't they offer. Then there will be a category covering the playstyles. Now I've broken it down into a couple of different playstyles, what I want to do is just when I cover each playstyle, I just want to talk about whether or not they can fit into this playstyle or whether it's just something you kind of have to just let go. And then there's going to be a summary. This is where I just go over some of the things that you can now take. So you look at the so we talk about the destroyers, we talk about the commanders, then we talk about what playstyles you can do from those two previous categories. Then we do a summary where we look at basically the previous three categories and almost do like a summary of what we got. Then I have a tech tree ranking. This is basically where I try and discuss my thoughts in regards to this tech tree and how it compares to other tech trees in regards to game modes. So I cover off standard and ranked play. And then at the very end, um, it's just a little bit of how would I improve it. Again, it's just a little bit of opinion, I guess you can say. But at the end of the day, um, if you agree or don't agree with the following, then that's perfectly fine. Everyone is individual, everyone plays differently, and everyone's going to have a different experience. But hopefully, fingers crossed, you do enjoy it, and even if you don't agree with it, maybe you can kind of understand where I'm coming from with these. So, the traits of the French destroyers. Now, this is going to be, again, like I was saying, a very broad brush approach. So, what traits do we have from the tier 4 to tier 7 destroyers? Well, we have a high HP, so you've got a lot of hit points, which is quite a nice little ability. Now, you have a large gun caliber, pretty much all of these tiers, and these guns do offer a reasonable to decent damage per minute. So they are going to be pumping out shells quite nicely, and they also have a reasonable to decent fires per minute, so they do set fires quite nicely. Downsides though is that you have slow traversing turrets, so in order to bring guns onto target it can take a little bit of time. Secondly, you have to be quite broad to bring all your guns onto target. If you want to have and maximize your DPM going down range, you have to be pretty much broadside on, which also then means that the kind of ability to swish in and out means that because you're only going from broad to if you try and swish in, you're not really going to be making your profile that small in comparison to what some of the other tech trees can do. Now, going on to the torpedoes, we have average to small torpedo broadside, depending how you go through the tier. But you're not really ever looking at a torpedo broadside of more than 6 torpedoes, unfortunately. Now, in some of the higher tiers, you do have that ability to do what some people call the French flip, where you have to almost just do a little circle and you fire off 2 launchers and then you can fire off your 3rd launcher, which does mean you can get all 9 torpedoes down range. The problem is that does mean you have to then take that into account in your playstyle and your map awareness. Now, the torpedoes do have a very high torpedo damage, which is quite a nice thing. So when they hit, they do hit hard. The torpedoes are of a reasonable speed and detectability, so they're not super fast, but not super slow, and they're not super obvious, but they're not super stealthy either. You do have limited torpedo arcs at times, especially on centerline mounted launchers. The maneuverability of the ships, they have a large turning circle and a slow rudder shift. So that also kind of can hinder your swishiness, I guess you could say, if you're trying to bring guns on and off a target, trying to dodge shots. But also it means that, again, like I'm trying to say, trying to dodge shots and torpedoes can be a little bit tricky due to that slow rudder shift. Now, considering that all of these ships do have the agile trait, I don't think that's applicable, and in fact, I think I would recommend that Wargaming go back through and actually remove this agile trait because they're not agile. Um, Agile basically means they should have above maneuverability um, in the water. When your redshift is slow and your turning circle is large, that's not agile at all. Speed is average except at tier 7 where it's good, so again you can't really say that the speed is a thing like to add into the agility of these. Going on to concealment, they have average concealment. They're not the sneakiest, they're not the most obvious, but they're smack bang in the middle. So if you play like modules and abilities the same way that everyone else does, you'll still end up being average. Going on to the consumables, one thing we're going to have to always note is that these destroyers do not have smoke, so they don't have a smoke screen in order to shoot from or to break off an engagement from, so that's something to bear in mind. Now they do have 2 engine boosts, and these do add 20% to the maximum speed, so when you activate the engine boost, these can be really nippy. However, their base speed is quite average. Now, from tier 5 upwards, these French destroyers do get a 1-number main battery reload booster. This main battery reload booster basically halves your main battery reload time for 15 seconds. So pretty much for 15 seconds, you've got twice the rate of fire, twice the amount of DPM. So this can be very effective when you need to maximize damage over time for a very short period of time. Now that's a very broad brush cover of the traits of the destroyers, but if you want a breakdown of the individual destroyers, then carded top right now will be the reviews of all of the destroyers in a playlist, so go check that out if you want to know an individual breakdown of each individual ship, but we'll just press on in this video in regards to the commanders. Now the commanders are Violetti and Abion. Both have access to reasonable base traits, with Violetti giving you a reduced detectability time after firing your guns, and Abion giving you an increased HE damage per shell. Now, neither of them come with Twist and Track, and Twist and Track is what is also known as RDF, Radio Direction Finder. This basically is an indicator to the nearest enemy ship. This can affect their playstyle, and we'll cover that off later on. Both have access to abilities which assist in keeping engine and rudder modules going. Now this is I feel quite critical to them, and so both of them have access to Unstoppable, and Violetti has access to Quick Fix. Now this is quite an amusing one. Both have access to smoke on the water, which is useless because the French destroyers don't come with smoke screens. In fact, there's only one premium French destroyer which comes with smoke screen. So it seems really odd to include this ability on both commanders for one ship in the entire game, ever, at the moment. So it doesn't seem... It's basically a useless ability, you can't take it. However, on both commanders, you have to take... Well, if you want an ability, you have to take the other ability at that tier, at that 4th level, and both of these have a negative. So for Violetti, the gunboat commander, you have to take a reduction of HP, which seems really strange for a gunboat. You don't really want to be taking a drop in HP. And then for the torpedo boat commander, Abion, it's a decrease in the grouping of your shells, which is acceptable because you're aiming for a torpedo boat with that commander normally. Now both have access to concealment traits, with both having Go All Out. Now Go All Out is a special ability for the French destroyer commanders, and this is a reduction to the warship's detectability while the engine boost is activated. Now to cover off the commanders, I did do a commander review, and that will be carded top right now. And if you want to go check that out, it will also be on the end screen as well. And now we're going into playstyles. Now, as I've mentioned, this is a broad brush approach. Right? This is just an initial look at them, and I'm not saying that these playstyles can or cannot be used. This is just my opinion on it, and your mileage may vary depending on what you've done or how well you've got into these destroyers. So first of all, I want to say that these are not destroyer hunters. The lack of RDF, twist and track, it means you can't seek and destroy. Or you can't seek, at least. If you want to seek and destroy, you're going to be better off playing the Russians and the United States destroyers. These are better at this role of seeking and destroying enemy destroyers. And even then, the Germans can be kind of flexed into it as well. That's the thing. So there's 3 other tech trees out there which can do a seek and destroy of enemy destroyers better. However, the French destroyers are very good destroyer killers. With their high HP, it gives them the survivability in that kind of combat. It also means that even though you don't have RDF to know where the enemy's coming from, your high HP pool means that you have time to get your guns on target, because you might not get the first shot off, but you'll still be around to get the shots out, and so therefore you still got time to actually win that engagement. And especially when you consider that they have a really high DPM base, which means you can really rack up damage. You've also got the main battery reload booster, which allows you to pretty much kill a destroyer in 15 seconds if you want. And then also, you have the ability to really give an enemy destroyer a bloody nose. Now, this would make you think maybe they're gunboats, but they can be played as gunboats, but I'd highly recommend that you play them in open water at range, because their poor rudder means that you don't have, you need to try and maximize how much time you have to react to incoming fire, because the rudder's quite sluggish. So if you're more at range, you've got more time for your rudder to dig in, which does mean that you might have to look into some kind of abilities to extend your range or take playing at range into your play style. Also, the lack of smoke means that you can't set up shop like you would an American or a Russian destroyer, where you literally lay a smoke screen, then that's your base for the next minute and a half or minute, where you just shoot at an enemy target from smoke while someone else does the spotting. Now, as a gunboat, you can maybe play behind an island, so that's a potential playstyle, but then that's almost taken the role of a cruiser, because you don't have the range to have a large effective area, even if you are hiding behind an island. And also, this is where the lack of smoke also hurts you again, because even the British can play, or the Germans can play as gunboats, because they have smoke screens. The British have little smoke screens that they can keep popping to keep harassing an enemy, and you don't have that smoke screen. But then also, for say a British destroyer, because they've got so many smoke screens, they do have a smoke to disengage. You're the only destroyer class out there that doesn't have a smoke screen to disengage. So it means if you do try and play as a gunboat, you're going to have to be aware of that. It means you are going to be quite heavily reliant on cover and your engine and your speed in order to break off an engagement. And this is where the engine boost is kind of really helpful. So that you have to take into account when you do that kind of playstyle. The other kind of playstyle, which I guess you could also play these as, is torpedo boats. Now, off the bat, I wouldn't say they are torpedo boats, but it is a playstyle that they can do, and it's how I've been playing them. The torpedoes do hit hard enough to cause high damage and flooding, and only a few torpedoes are required to kill high HP targets like battleships. So if you spec them out right, these can be really good battleship killers, but you have to note that the role is quite limited due to your torpedo range and your concealment range not giving you a large buffer of stealth torpedo range, and then also because of those 2 things, you're very limited in how you can torpedo an enemy ship. you're usually looking at ships that are coming towards you or sailing parallel to you. If they start running away, there's not going to be any chance of you being able to catch up enough to get torpedoes ahead of them. With some destroyer tech trees, the torpedo range is so good that you could be behind a battleship and it could be steaming away and you could still get torpedoes to go to where they're going. You can't do this with this tech tree, so you are got a limited role as a torpedo boat. Now, there is another playstyle that you can always take into account, and that is being an objective taker. Now, against an unsupported DD, the French DDs are going to be great at capturing and defending capture points because you'll be able to push in and no enemy DD is going to want to come near you unless it's supported, and that's the pitfall here. Against a supported DD, so that's a DD that's been supported by a cruiser or by a battleship or by the rest of his team, you can't hold on to that objective. You don't have a smoke screen to pop and try and make it a close-in knife fight. You don't have sonar to use against the enemy DD. If an enemy DD pushes in close with a cruiser in support, what you can do is quite limited, and you're usually going to have to break off. So that's something that you're going to have to bear in mind. Now, that's just a broad brush approach to the playstyles. However, you may have different mileage when it comes to this, and you may disagree or agree. But that's just my general summary on what I think in regards to the playstyles of the French destroyers. So here we are at the kind of like summary. So basically summarising everything that we've talked about before and how I'd interpret these destroyers. Well, I'd say these French destroyers are very high risk, high reward glass cannons. I would say that they have a high skill floor compared to other destroyer tech trees, meaning this tech tree has less user friendly entry level, especially for new players. If you're a seasoned player, you might really enjoy these though. Because I think these destroyers have a very high skill ceiling. So I think if you can bear with them and put a lot of time into them, these destroyers will be really quite rewarding. The thing is they might be quite taxing at the same time because they're going to have, whatever you do with them, you're going to have to do a lot of map awareness of what's going on, because when things go wrong, it goes horribly wrong with these destroyers. If you get caught out in the open, then you might as well just put your controller down sometimes. You know what I mean? Just when it goes wrong, it just goes wrong really badly. And you can probably see a couple of examples of that in my reviews and let's plays of these destroyers. Now, the main battery reload booster is a great way of putting the pain out there. The downside is you only get one of them, so that means if you accidentally misuse it or the enemy breaks off, then you don't have any kind of safety net. It's kind of like you popped it, you got 15 seconds, you better make it worthwhile. And if you're shooting an enemy destroyer, sometimes an enemy destroyer might just wait to see that you've popped your main battery reload booster before they pop their smoke, because then they know that they've taken your one consumable that can really hurt them away. And so that's something that you always got to bear in mind. It's very much like the torpedo reload booster on the Japanese destroyers. Once people know that you've used it, they can then take advantage of it because now they know that's gone. Now, another one to summarize is that they have some very odd commanders. Now, these commanders do offer some level of flexibility within the torpedo boat and gunboat roles. However, like I mentioned before, on the gunboat commander, having to take a loss of HP in order to have an ability over not being able to have an ability at that 4th level does just seem really strange. And it's quite a difficult one to try and decide in between. You kind of like, do I want an ability that could possibly harm my ship, or do I want to take an ability which does absolutely nothing? So now we get to the ranking of this tech tree. Now I'm going to be looking at standard play and ranked gameplay. So first of all, I want to cover ranked gameplay. Now, Obviously, this is going to be in regards to the tier 5 and the tier 6 destroyers only. The reason being is those are the most common tiers of ranked gameplay, and I don't really want to be covering off the tier 7s because they're probably not going to introduce tier 7 ranked for a long time, and I don't really want to cover off tier 4 because we've only ever had one season of tier 4 ranked, and it seems a bit pointless for me covering that when we've only had it once. So I only see these being played by those who have specialised in them. Is the best way to put it. If you're good at these, then you're going to be good at them and you're going to play them. If you're crap at them, you're not going to play them. is the best way to put it. But when it comes to ranked, I feel that the British and the German destroyers are still going to be top tier, or the most common as well, due to their sonar and their flexibility, their ability to hold an objective, defend an objective, um, seek out an enemy. Like they've got so much flexibility within their ships and their commanders that I think they're still going to be the most used. Um, then I would say the next tier of destroyers would be the Japanese and the Americans. Now, this is due to their partial flexibility. So it's like the Americans, they're definitely gunboats, but they do have torpedoes. And then it's like the French, not the French, the Japanese destroyers, they're definitely torpedo boats, but they still have some decent gun. Like the guns aren't amazing, but they still hurt. So that's something to bear in mind. And I'd say they're like a like seconds tier. I'm not saying there's massive gaps between these tiers, but I'd put them in what I'd call the second tier. They're still going to be common enough that you're going to see them, but I wouldn't say they're possibly the strongest unless you have specialised in them, is the best way to put it. And also, another reason why they're in this tier is because they are very good at the roles that they are assigned. So the Americans are very, very good gunboats, and the Japanese are very, very good torpedo boats. This unfortunately does mean that the Russians and the French are in that third tier, or the bottom tier, I guess you could say. The Russians, due to their lack of flexibility, they are only gunboats. Their torpedoes are horrendous, and they're kind of like, once you've killed an enemy DD, that's pretty much your game, unless you're going to be popping smoke and shooting from them, but even then you have quite limited abilities in doing that. And then the French, I'm going to put there as well because of their lacking ability to hold an objective, especially against a supported DD. So a French destroyer is going to be able to go in. If there's an enemy DD, it can deal with that DD. But if it comes in and goes into an objective and gets spotted, and there's cruisers and stuff, it's lacking ability to break off the engagement. Or even just pop a smoke and stick it out in the objective as well, and like contest it for as long as possible. Those playstyles aren't in the deck of cards for the French DD. So I think the Russians and the French, you're not going to see as many of them, especially when you consider that the French destroyers have that very high skill floor. They're not really beginner friendly. Now going on to standard battle. Now here, I think it's you're going to have a better position simply because the way that standard battle is focused. It Even though there's domination, you got to capture the objectives and stuff. Sometimes the way that people play, um, the emphasis on holding an objective is slightly less critical, and it is kind of a bit more diluted, and therefore it does offer a bit more flexibility in the play styles of the ships. So overall, I'd say that they are better addition to the game than the Russians in regards to standard battle. They offer some new play styles to the game, and they they offer a challenge. If you're looking for a challenge, then this tech tree is a worthy tech tree to try and master. That's the thing. Like, I just going through, I don't think they're amazing, but I think they're worthwhile, and I still think they're good. They're still good enough. That's the thing. But how would I improve it? Well, I would love to see Violetti have a tier 3 ability rework, which would include twist and track. That I really would like to see. Um, Another thing I would love to see would be a rework of the fourth tier abilities of both commanders to remove the smoke on the water, or at least add a third option. Now, even if that third option isn't amazing, but it's something that's more worthwhile than taking smoke on the water, but maybe it doesn't offer as much benefits as the other existing ability, but maybe it doesn't offer any negatives as well. Just something that's in between. Just actually give us an option between two proper abilities, rather than it being no ability or an ability that comes with a negative. So that's really it. That's the thing. It's only the commanders I'd like to see some minor rework on, but I think all in all, I wouldn't actually change the ships. That's the thing. I think they've been designed quite well. They have acceptable trade-offs. You've got high caliber guns but slow traverse. You've got hard hitting guns, but you have to be quite broad. You have average speed but a really good engine boost. Um, your rudder's not amazing, but then I think it's acceptable. It's historically accurate, and then also at the same time, there's other destroyers in this game which also have poor rudder shift. So it's not like these are setting an example which is completely out there. They're on par with some of the other destroyers in the game. Some of the German destroyers, some of the Russian destroyers. It's that big destroyer concept. And if you've got something big, long, and narrow, it's not going to turn very well in the water. So you can't wish them to have better rudder. I mean, you can't really wish them to have more torpedoes and things like that. So you have to always try and think of it in the concept of what little changes could they do to these ships. And I think all in all, I wouldn't change the ships. The ships themselves are good, and maybe you could give them smoke screens. But then I think I don't want to do that. I like the idea of keeping these as non-smoke screen destroyers. I think it adds a completely interesting level to them. I just I feel that any kind of rework that actually needs to be done to these to maybe make them a bit more viable or a bit more user friendly is going to be in the commanders. But then that's just my personal opinion. Well, I hope you've enjoyed it, guys. It's been a nice thing to work through and write up this script, which has been made available on Patreon about 12 hours early, I think, maybe a little bit more. But yeah, no, that's everything that I want to say about these. I don't think they're terrible, but I don't think they're great. And I think any kind of rework that needs to be done to the commanders is the very, very quick summary. But if you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you enjoy this kind of content, feel free to subscribe. And if you are already a subscriber, then I'd like to thank you very much, guys, for your support and contributions to the channel. Did you like this? Would you like me to do it more in future, or do you think it's not worthwhile? Do you have any of your own thoughts that you'd like to add? Obviously, remember this is partially my opinion, so I'm not saying I'm right. I'm quite happy for you to say I'm wrong, but also remember this is a very broad brush approach, so please don't come back with loads of comments saying, oh, but in this very particular case, in this particular ship, in this particular scenario, it's really, like, I know those particular situations do occur. This is just a very broad brush approach. But yeah, well, I'd like to thank you all, and until next time, I'm the Gareth Major, and back to the port.